What's up guys, my name's Brandon and yes, I am officially selling my iPhone XS because of the iPhone XR. And let me explain why I'm doing this and why I think that you should also buy an iPhone XR instead of an iPhone XS. So before we get to the main reason I decided to sell the iPhone XS for the iPhone XR, let's run through a comparison of these two 2018 iPhones. And of course, let's start with the main topic of discussion, the price. So the iPhone XR starts at $749 for 64 gigabytes and goes up to $899 for 256 gigabytes. Meanwhile, the iPhone XS starts at $999 and goes up to $1349 for 512 gigabytes. So there's a $250 difference between these two devices. Of course, you do get additional storage for the top option on the iPhone XS, whereas it only goes to 256 on the XR. But that's not really the point. If you're looking at buying a XR, you're probably not going to get it in its most expensive form anyways. You're probably getting it because it's affordable, so you're probably going to go with a 64 gigabyte variant or maybe a 128 anyways. So yeah, there is a $250 difference between these two devices, and there's really not too much different between the two overall. Now, of course, the variety of colors you get with the iPhone XR will be appealing to a lot of people. I mean, it's not a huge deal to me. I usually tend to go with black or space gray, but I did like the product red. I got the product red right here. You can also get black, white, coral, yellow, and blue on the iPhone XR. Meanwhile, with the iPhone XS, you get half of the color choices, so you get 3 choices with silver, space gray, and gold. Now, as for the build of each device, both of these phones feel premium in the hand, but the iPhone XS does have a stainless steel frame, whereas the iPhone XR has an aluminum frame around the body. And if you hold these two side by side in the hand, you will feel they feel about the same, but when you look at them and feel, specifically on the border, you can tell that it is stainless steel on the iPhone XS versus the aluminum. It's almost like matte on the side. If you just think of what the matte feeling feels like, that's what the side of the iPhone XR feels like. They both feel really high quality. It just almost seems like it's glass on the sides of the iPhone XS. If you didn't know that it was made out of stainless steel, you would probably think it was glass, just like the front and back. But it's not really a big difference to me. I mean, I like the feel of matte on the iPhone XR, and one doesn't feel more premium than the other in the hand. And the reality is most people are going to be rocking cases on these devices, so you're not even going to see the border of the phone pretty much ever when you use it. And speaking of the frame of these devices, with that stainless steel frame on the iPhone XS, it does come with IP68 water resistance rating, and that's compared to the IP67 rating on the iPhone XR. And to me personally, this isn't a huge deal, and to 90% of people, this isn't a huge deal unless you just like keeping your phone in your pocket when you swim, or you find yourself, constantly forgetting to take your phone out of your pocket when you're going into water or something like that. I really just can't see any reason why you would pay extra specifically to get IP68 rated versus IP67. Both phones are going to be great with dealing with water, like when it rains out or when you maybe drop it into water just for a split second. Both phones are going to be fine for that. Now, looking around the phone itself, you will notice that there are slightly larger bezels here on the iPhone XR compared to the iPhone XS. So you can see around the edges, you can still see some black here on the iPhone XS, but it's much more pronounced. It's much more noticeable here on the iPhone XR. And that kind of goes hand in hand with the thickness of the iPhone XR. The XR is definitely a good bit thicker than the iPhone XS, and you can tell when it is in your hand. It's not so much as being much heavier than the iPhone XS. It's just kind of, if you have them side by side, holding them in the hand, you could tell that it's thicker than the XS, but it's not super thick by any means. I mean, it's still pretty thin, but it is pretty thick when you think about, recent iPhones. So yeah, you do have noticeable bezels here on the iPhone XR, but the reality is, unless you have an iPhone X or an iPhone XS right now, these bezels are not really going to phase you because the screen is still going to look way better than your old iPhone did, especially since we don't have the home button down there. We don't have that chin. We don't have, the same size bezels as we did on the older iPhones. So yeah, there is more bezel on the iPhone XR than some of the other newer iPhones, but you're probably going to be coming to the iPhone XR from an older device than the iPhone X or the XS. Now, speaking of that controversial screen, let's talk about it. So the iPhone XR here on the right has a 6.1-inch LCD display with a resolution of 1792 by 828 with a 326 pixels per inch ratio. And then over here we have the iPhone XS with a 5.8-inch OLED screen with a 2436 by 1125 resolution at 458 pixels per inch. Now, people were so quick to jump on the iPhone XR for having just 326 pixels per inch in a sub 1080p display, but they complained about it without even using the iPhone in person. Like, everybody that's complaining about it does not own an iPhone XR. And by the way, the iPhone XR has the same PPI as the iPhone 8 and a higher PPI than the 2018 iPad Pro. So for those people that think that that really matters, there you go. I mean, it does matter, but it does not matter near as much as people think. So let's throw these specs out of the window here and talk reality. And the reality is the iPhone XR screen is great. I mean, the all new Liquid Retina display that Apple introduced with this iPhone XR is no joke. And after watching some videos like this 4K video I'm watching right here, you're going to be surprised that this isn't an OLED screen. I think it was Jonathan Morrison that did a video, a blind video test, basically having people look at the iPhone XR compared to other OLED panels, and they thought that the iPhone XR was an OLED panel and that it had a better display than like the iPhone XS and other phones. So yeah, don't be a sheep and just listen to everything that you hear out there, because a lot of these people making these comments have not used an iPhone XR and are just quick to bash it and just not even give it a chance. So definitely go ahead and check out the iPhone XR display. You can see here when we zoom in as well, you can see it looks very good compared to the OLED screen on the iPhone XS. Obviously the XS does have a slightly better picture, but it's not by much at all. Definitely not $250 better. Now, if we flip these guys over to the back, you can see that we have a single lens camera here on the iPhone XR, a 12 megapixel single lens. And on the iPhone XS, we have a dual camera setup, both 12 megapixels there on the iPhone XS. And the only real difference that this dual camera setup on the iPhone XS has over the single camera lens here on the iPhone XR is for optical zoom. Now, I will say that I do use optical zoom quite a bit on my main daily driver device, which is the iPhone XS Max. So I did expect this to be a huge drawback for me, but it didn't end up being a big drawback at all for me. If I go into the camera here and I go to zoom, you can see that you could digitally zoom, just as easily. And I found that it didn't really reduce the quality that much when I would zoom digitally. Instead of having that 2x right there, we do have to do it, manually. So it's a little bit annoying that I don't have that, easy button to click right there like we did on the iPhone XS. You can see right there the 1x, and then it goes into 2x just like that. That's the only thing you're missing from not having that dual camera setup. But like I said, it's not bad to just have to zoom in manually like that, and you don't lose the quality either. You don't lose as much quality, I should say. You probably do lose a little bit. Now, you do also lose out on some portrait features with the single lens setup on the iPhone XR, like for portrait mode. So for instance, you can only use it on faces instead of objects like you can on the XS and any phone with the dual camera setup. So like right here, you can see on the XS that I can do a portrait photo of the HomePod right there. If I back up, there we go. So I can do it on the HomePod, but on the iPhone XS, or on the iPhone XR rather, it says no person detected. I have to have a face to be able to use portrait mode. So that is a bummer, because I do like to take portrait photos of objects and not just faces, but that is something you're going to miss out on here. And you do have less effects as well. You only have 3 effects here for the faces, but you can see you have multiples here on the iPhone XS. You have 3, 4, 5 on the XS. So you're missing out on 2 of them here on the XR with that single lens setup. But once again, this is definitely not something that you would pay $250 more for just to get those portrait abilities on the XS. All right, so let's talk about battery life now, because this is one area where the iPhone XR shines. So the iPhone XR has a 2942 milliamp hour battery compared to the 2658 milliamp hour battery here on the iPhone XS. And I did do a battery test comparing these two, and in that video, you're gonna see that surprisingly, the iPhone XR actually died before the XS, which was shocking to most people, including myself. But I will say that actually using these two phones day to day and actually using them as my daily driver, I used the XR as my daily driver for 2 weeks, almost 3 weeks, and I used the iPhone XS for about a week as my daily driver. But I do find that the XR did constantly get better battery life than the iPhone XS. Not by as much as I had hoped when it first got announced, when the iPhone XR first got announced, but it is an important area where the XR does have the advantage when it comes to day-to-day usage. But as you guys saw from that battery test video, the iPhone XS will be able to play a YouTube video for longer than the iPhone XR will, and I'm guessing that has something to do with the display difference, the LCD versus the OLED. Now, as for the overall performance, both of these phones have Apple's new A12 Bionic chip, and the speed test I ran between these two was extremely close as expected, so I wouldn't say that one phone is faster than the other. iOS just runs great on both, but one thing that is missing from the iPhone XR is 3D touch. So you can see when I press in on something, it basically just wiggles, goes into wiggle mode. But on the iPhone XS, if I do that, we get 3D touch and we get these menus right here for the applications that support it, which is pretty much every application these days. So yeah, 3D touch is missing from the iPhone XR. We do have it in the control center. So if we go to control center, and it's called haptic touch on this, but if we go to something like the platter right here, if we long press, you can see it right there. If we go to the calculator and long press, it basically mimics 3D touch, so it's called haptic touch. It's not really the full effect. You don't get the feeling of 3D Touch. It's not a pressure sensitive screen, which is kind of annoying because 3D Touch is one of my favorite features in iOS. So it is a bummer that that's not on the iPhone XR, but once again, that's not something that I'd pay $250 more for. So there is a quick rundown of the iPhone XS and the iPhone XR compared. So I wanted to talk about the main reason that I'm selling the iPhone XS because of the XR. So like I said before, the main reason is because the screen, the resolution and everything is simply not $250 better on the iPhone XS. It's just not. Every other feature or advantage that the iPhone XS has aside from 3D Touch is just simply not a big deal to 99% of people. I mean, maybe more than that. So pretty much everything, you know, is kind of just it's almost a gimmick. It's not really a gimmick, like the portrait mode features and the effects and things like that. It's not really a gimmick, but it's kind of gimmicky, and it's not really something that is going to make you want to spend, you know, more money to get another phone with those, you know, effects on it. Not to mention that the size of the iPhone XR just fits better in my hand and just looks better than the iPhone XS does. And maybe that's just me, you know, maybe that's just my personal preference, but I do tend to like the bigger phones, the bigger display phones like the XR. So for all those reasons I mentioned, I do encourage you to get the iPhone XR over the iPhone XS and at least use it for a week or so. And if you don't like it, you can of course return it and maybe get the iPhone XS if you do have an additional $250 just laying around. But for those of you, you know, on a crunch and, you know, are on a budget, I would say the iPhone XR is great. It's pretty much the iPhone XS, just with a few features missing. And like I said, the display is great. Do not let all the critics and the people talking trash about it, you know, sway your opinion. The display is great. So yeah, I hope you guys did enjoy this video. If you do agree or disagree, make sure to leave a comment down in the comment section below. Also make sure to give this video a thumbs up. If you did enjoy it, I would really appreciate it. And also make sure to subscribe for a lot more iPhone and iOS related content. But anyways, guys, thanks again for watching, and I'll see you soon.